Ooh, baby, hey, baby, ooh, baby, hey. Hi guys, this is my review for Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. There's going to be spoilers straight away today, so if that bothers you, it's time to make like a tree and get out of here. So this is the one where Jason takes a rest because he's dead and under the ground, fair enough, and Roy Burns steps in as a one-time killer, a copycat killer. So my personal experience of watching this film is that I rented it in the 90s. I was going through a phase at the time where I was renting lots of Halloween films, Friday the 13th films, completely out of order most of the time. And when I rented this, there was no internet back then. I did not know that Jason wasn't in this film. So I watched most of the film just thinking that it was Jason doing all the killings. And I started to get suspicious just towards the end when I think the blonde woman whose name escapes me, she sort of gets Roy in the leg and he sits down on some hay and he's like, oh, he's like clutching his leg or something. And I remember thinking, God, Jason looks really weak in this movie and he's thin, he's not stocky enough. They've cast this really badly. And then when the flaps come off at the end and you see that it's not actually Jason, I was like, oh, right. I wouldn't say I was disappointed or anything like that. On first viewing, I thought this movie was very mediocre. So by the time it got to the big reveal in the last scene, I was kind of like, well, whatever, okay. Now, I've seen the film multiple times since then, and I'm not actually that bothered that Roy's in this movie. I know some people have a problem with it, but I think it's quite logical that if you're going to do a long-running series where the same killer comes back again and again and you're constantly having to think up new ways to bring him back from the dead, why not, from a creative standpoint, give yourself a break, have a copycat killer step in? Because it makes sense to me that if somebody's killing people in the same area over multiple years with a mask on, some other psychopath might just see their opportunity to step in, put the same mask on. Then if anybody sees them getting away from a murder scene, then they're going to think that it's the other person, Jason. The timing is slightly off though. I mean, everybody sort of knows that Jason is dead, properly dead, before this film. He's in the ground, or actually he's being cremated. I know that gets retconned in the film after this, but in this movie, he's being cremated. We get a scene where the cops are sat around in the police station. They're perfectly right in saying it can't be Jason. He's not alive anymore, full stop. So it maybe would have made more sense for a copycat to come in between part 2 and part 3 when Jason's just missing, or dare I say after part 8 when Jason's off missing in New York somewhere. The timing is a little bit off in this film for there to be a copycat, but I guess Roy can't pick and choose when his son is going to get brutally slain. Now, I do think his reaction to his son's death is a little bit too obvious. I mean, the first time I watched the film, I wouldn't have even been looking out for any clues that somebody else other than Jason was the killer. But when you watch this film for the second time and beyond, it's really uncomfortably obvious that Roy's the killer. He's just sat there smouldering in front of the camera when they find Joey's body. He's like, well, he might as well do that. I mean, he might as well put on the hockey mask right there and then at the crime scene. And if anybody asks what he's doing with a hockey mask on, it would just say, shut up and put it on for a fancy dress party later. Leave me alone. The weird thing about Roy in this film is that he tries to kill everybody at the halfway house except the one person who killed his son. I get that he's been moved to a jail cell somewhere, but from having seen part 6 and just how small the Crystal Lake police station is, couldn't Roy have broken in there and got to Vic? I mean, there's one office desk in there, there's one jail cell, the place is never manned by more than one cop most of the time. Sometimes there's not even any cops in there, they just put their daughters in there to watch the place. Surely Roy could have got in. Now, I could sort of buy the argument that maybe because Vic hacked somebody to death in such a violent way, they could have fast-tracked him out to some bigger police station somewhere else, maybe. But given that this is the movie world and we can tailor things to what the movie needs, maybe Vic could have been kept in the Crystal Lake jail for just a couple of nights, just enough time for Roy to get there and give us a bit of dramatic action. You know, we could have found out why Vic is so angry. Is it just that difficult to be a roommate of Debbie Sue Voorhees when she's with somebody else? I don't know, but it's weird how Vic just leaves the movie and that's it. There are a lot of characters in this film who are very likable, but we just don't find out enough about them. I think Tina and her boyfriend are fine. I think Ethel and her son are fine. I really like those characters, those two sort of hillbillies. I think they use just about the right amount. And one of the things I enjoy about this film on rewatch is seeing Ethel and her son. Time and time again, they just crack me up. But there are other characters who are definitely underdeveloped. The main final girl, Pam, that's her name. I think it's cool that they used a woman of sort of 30. It makes a change from the usual 2021, but we just don't find out enough about her. We're supposed to get behind her just because she seems like a nice woman, but we find out next to nothing about her. I'm not even sure if she's meant to be the husband or boyfriend of Matthew, who's the main guy running the institution. They come across like they might be a kind of husband and wife team, but there's no confirmation either way if they are together or not. There's certainly no chance of any romance between Pam and this version of Tommy. They have no chemistry even as friends in this movie. I think if it had been the Tommy from part 6, possibly there could have been a romance there, but as it is, no. I don't like the Tommy in this film. It's nothing against the actor, but he's just written to be the most boring final boy I've ever seen in a horror film. It's awful. I think they should have made Matthew the main sort of final boy, had him and Pamela taking on Roy towards the end. Just have Tommy die halfway through, and then we'll have a different character dig Jason up in part 6. Matthew and Pamela would have been a much more watchable team taking on Roy towards the end. Whether or not they're already a couple or whether they would develop a romance in such a situation. I think another couple of people who could have really led this film from the front would have been Reggie and Demon working together, two brothers who maybe not spent much time with each other recently, but if Demon had been allowed to survive the toilet scene and get to the halfway house later on, work with his brother, they could have had a really fun chemistry, could have had a bit of comedy in there, then they could have survived the movie and gone off together, walked off into the sunset. I just think either of those options, Matthew and Pamela or Demon and Reggie, would have been a lot better than just having Tommy, this version of Tommy, carry the movie because he's just not good. There are other characters who I would have liked to have gotten to know better, but just didn't. Robin, Violet, you know, we just don't get to spend enough time with them. And as it is, I think we spend far too long watching death scenes in this movie of characters for whom their only scene is the scene where they die. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the kills now, and the main thing I want to say is that there are way too many of them in this film. By the halfway point, I'm just numbed from the amount of kills, and some of them are on characters who we've only met in the same scene that they're being bumped off. I think they should have halved the amount of kills in this film and it would have been a lot better. If you look at the previous Friday films, part 1, part 2, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I'm sure those movies had half the kills in part 5, and for good reason. I'm definitely the sort of guy who likes there to be a minimal amount of kills and lots of build up. You know, you get to know the characters and their situations very well. In this film, it's like there's some kind of mandate to just kind of churn through as many kills as possible, regardless of what it does for the story. I definitely think they should have taken out some of the kills of people away from the halfway house. So the guy and the girlfriend at the cafe, the two douches whose car breaks down, those two scenes alone, you could save 5 minutes of screen time, which could be much better used on developing the characters at the halfway house a lot more. Just have a few scenes where they sat around, maybe they look out the window on a rainy night and spot Roy in the bushes and it freaks them out a little bit, build up the tension a little bit. The kills that we do get are not actually that amazing anyway, considering the fact that the main emphasis of this film does seem to be kills. I really like the Violet one. That's probably my favourite in the movie. I think they took some inspiration from Crispin Glover in part 4 when it comes to the robot dance. That's my really bad effort at it. I like the fact that Violet's room just happens to have a convenient little alcove that the killer can get gradually closer to her without being spotted. Robin's kill's quite good, not because of the method of execution, but I love the irony that that guy ends up in her bed. That's what he wanted. Maybe not in that way, but that's what he wanted. And I suppose I should mention the Tina kill. That's sort of the iconic one in this film, the garden shears going down into the eyes. Although that scene is a little bit spoiled by the kill which comes after it because it makes no sense. The one with the belt wrapped around the guy's head. When I first saw the movie, I thought that looked really cool, but on repeat viewings, I just think to myself, the kill makes no sense whatsoever. How can Roy predict that Eddie, I think his name is, will see Tina's body and just perfectly back into a tree and rest his back of his head on a tree trunk? He's there ready with the belt and the clip as if he absolutely knows this is going to happen. And then even if Eddie does what Roy wants him to do, you've then still got to throw the belt perfectly around the forehead and the tree, catch it, and then you've got to pull hard. By the time you did that, the person in front would easily be able to drop down. There's no way you would be able to pull that kill off in real life. Now, I think for my final positive thing I'm going to say about the film today would be the opening. I think that's a very effective start that involves Corey Feldman coming in for one scene. That's the only moment of genuine tension in the film, when Jason comes out of his grave and he's looking straight ahead and you're not quite sure if he's spotted Tommy or not. I think there should have been more scenes like that in the film. I'm not sure if people will guess that that's a dream sequence. I mean, it's a little bit iffy that the grave is not in a graveyard, although the fact that Jason is a serial killer of some notoriety by the time we get to part 5, it's possible that the local townsfolk would not have wanted him in their graveyard. They would have insisted that he'd just be buried somewhere deep in the woods, somewhere really random that not many people are going to come across. So that could have happened theoretically if he'd not been incinerated, as seems to be the implication in this movie. So I've got a couple more negatives just to quickly rattle through before I move on to my score for this film. Firstly, I don't think they used the halfway house as well as they should have done. There are too many scenes possibly that take place away from the halfway house. I mean, if you think about it, what actually happens in this supposedly huge 9 or 10 bedroom mini mansion? Not a lot. There's a couple of kills near the end, a couple of breakfast scenes. We get to see Tommy in his room a couple of times, but I leave this film not really having a clue where all the rooms are in relation to each other. And it almost leaves me feeling like they didn't have this building for real. Maybe they were filming in much smaller houses and just trying to trick you into thinking it's a bigger place. But I don't know. Possibly the information's out there to find this out one way or the other. My second big complaint is the chase at the end is not up to par with the finales that we had in the first 4 movies. Those films all had great finishes, great endings, great final battles. The one in this film is just very sloppily directed. It's not very exciting. It's almost boring, actually. By the time we get to the final chase in this, I'm ready to turn the film off, and I'm not interested in all the stuff which happens at the hospital after Roy has been revealed as the killer, especially in light of the fact that we know that Tommy is not going to turn bad in part 6. It's nothing to do with the fact that Roy is the killer, by the way, when it comes to the finale. It could have been Jason stepping into Roy's shoes. It would still be a very poor final chase. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what today's score is. So we've got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5. That's still a decent score. I know I've done a lot of complaining throughout this review, probably more than I have praising, but this score could possibly be the Friday fan in me just sticking up for it a little bit. It's still a fun movie to watch. It's just very flawed. And it is frustrating because they had so much going for them with this film. They had the location, they had some good characters potentially, a great story with the whole copycat motif. And I just think they let themselves down a little bit with the writing, and possibly the director wasn't quite right for this. So 3 out of 5, still a decent score, but that is way down on the score that I gave the first 4 movies. All 4 of those films scored 4.5 out of 5, with me. Right, I will be back next time to do Friday the 13th, part 6. I've got a sneaky feeling the score could be rising up again for that one. Till next time, cheerio.